I'm Janelle, and this is today's Heartlift with Janelle. In his new book, Analog Christian, author and pastor J.Y. Kim writes, "The apps we are using are actually using us." You see, the problem isn't the technology. We are not so much the customers as the products. Each search and click provides valuable data to companies constantly searching for ways to effectively commodify our attention and, more slyly, our addiction. The bottom line is to keep us scrolling and swiping at any cost. And one of the most effective ways of lulling us in is to situate us in a never-ending loop of comparison, which eventually breeds contempt, before finally devolving into unprecedented levels of self-centric despair. This often leads to a nagging, incessant impatience as we desperately seek morsels of satisfaction that always leave us wanting. Heartlifters, I don't know about you, but I feel like I have this raging argument going on inside of my very being. I like to think that I am a really qualified mediator. I study, I research, I put in the time, the energy, and the space to really study human relationships and learn ways that will help heart rifts transform and transition into heart lifts. And so I've had to take a step back over this summer, as I've already shared with you, to attend to this argument that's going on inside of my being. It's the old adage, right? I have a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. And the conflict has a lot to do with social media and the time and energy and space that I myself put into social media and an online community. Now, I love our heart-lifting online community, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And yes, I love it. But on the other hand, we always hold things in both hands in this community. That's what I'm training myself to do. Look at both sides of the coin. Things aren't necessarily binary. It's not either or, but both and. And I'm a part of an industry, publishing, Christian publishing, particularly, that seemingly, or I am told, depends on my platform and my numbers. Well, to be honest, I have put 3.5 decades into this industry. I have 3 books, but my numbers really don't show proof that I am reaching a wide audience. I know it's frustrating because I believe in my work, I believe in my books, but when the numbers and when the followers and when all of those things are looked at when I submit a proposal or when I'm trying to get speaking events or etc., all of those things seemingly matter a lot. And so I've had to step back and really examine's the right word, my motives and the amount of time in my life that I am giving to all of that. And really asking myself, is this just a futile exercise or am I really making a difference? Is my influence important enough to take this much time out of my daily existence, apart from my practice, my private practice, which also takes a great deal of my mental energy, my physical presence, and my time to research and study for each individual client's situation and issue. And I love that as well. So everything I do love it, but examining the cost, the scriptures tell us, count the cost before you build a building. Count the cost. And we also know that the body keeps the score. And I, once again, have had some physical challenges. And so I pay attention to my body and I pay attention when it speaks to me because it has been a good friend to me through the years, and it has warned me and it has cautioned me. And so now I'm like, okay, I hear you, body, and I love you, and I am going to pay attention to you because you will not lead me astray. So we've had this conversation in our community a lot. I know many of you are not part of a publishing industry. We perhaps don't have that in common. But I do know this about you, dear Heartlifters. You are a high-functioning community. You want to leave an impact, you want to have influence, and you want to utilize your full capacity of potential and purpose. I know that. You tell me this. You're drawn to that. And so we are constantly then being urged to take a time of examination. I am so happy to bring to you today this conversation with Jay Kim, Analog Christian. I truly believe he's going to offer us some fresh insights on how we can do all of this and how we can manage the both and. Maybe if you are someone like myself and you have a small business or you have a need to be on social media to allow people to know what you're doing and what you're offering, how can we do that without it draining us? So you might want to grab your journal, notebook, pen, highlighter, or just a cup of something delicious and sip and savor each and every word of this conversation and allow it to speak to you. Well, welcome, Jay. We're so excited. I have already introduced you to my Heartlifters, and we're just so happy to have you here to open our eyes and open our ears to what we're allowing in our eyes and in our ears. So welcome.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, really, really looking forward to the conversation.
Oh my gosh, I am too. And like I said to you beforehand, this is a very deep topic to talk about this whole world of analogging.
Mm,
And your first book was Analog Church, which I have not read, but I will now.
mm.
And this book is Analog Christian. How do they connect? I'm just curious. Or do
Yeah,
they connect at all?
they do. Yeah, they do. When I began writing Analog Church, I actually originally intended to write Analog Christian first, and in some
Oh,
conversations with the publisher, and I think it was the right move. They thought, let's write the Analog Church book first, and then Analog Christian. The reason being, Analog Church is a book that's actually quite a bit more focused on church leaders. I was writing to church leaders in particular,
okay.
and essentially asking the question: are there some ways that in the local church in the sort of modern Western world that we may have sort of recklessly leveraged digital technologies simply by asking what they can do for us and for our churches without
Mm.
adequately asking the question, well, what are they doing to form us and specifically to
Oh,
form our churches and to form sort of our understanding or better yet misunderstanding of what it means to be the church. So that's really the first book.
mhm.
And then Analog Christian is a much broader book asking the same question, but not just about churches, rather more specifically about the individual, human being who is an
Yeah.
analog. To be human is to be analog, is to be physical, tactile. Um,
Yes.
and as we immerse ourselves in our digital addictions and digital proclivities, are there some ways in which our addictions are deforming our humanity? So that's really what Analog Christian is about.
These words you choose. That's what I just kept gasping over when I was reading through the book. It's just the word choices
Mm,
are just very astute and well done, and they really make me pause. So
mm,
just as you just said, I mean, the deforming.
yeah.
I mean, come on. Now I want to talk about analog church.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll stay focused. But how, as a pastor, if I can ask, have you seen it deforming?
Yeah.
church.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot, right? We can
Hmm.
talk about sort of
Yeah.
outrage culture and what that's done to us. You don't have
Yeah.
to be a pastor. I'm sure
No.
everybody listening has had the experience of somebody on their social media feed, saying stuff that it's hard to fathom they would say that to a real life person
I
face to
know.
face, and the way
I
they're
do.
saying it, and everybody's angry about something at all times,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying there isn't time and place. There certainly is a time and place for
Hmm.
sort of addressing, acknowledging, bringing to light injustice in our
Hmm.
world. So I'm not saying, hey, everybody just settle down. It
Right.
seems like we are looking for the wrong in not just situations and
Hmm.
circumstances, but sadly in one another.
Yeah.
So that's, deforming us. We are sort of becoming undone in terms of the
Hmm.
way we relate to each other. I think we are losing sense of what it means to, again,
Hmm.
the way of Jesus, which is the way
Hmm.
of love. It's
Yes.
generous, it's kind, it's humble. I
Hmm.
think about Paul's words in Philippians, his admonition for us to be like Christ, who, you know, humbled himself by going to the cross, literally
He
dying,
did.
and
Yeah.
the same Jesus who commands us to love our enemies, that's something that I think we
Hmm.
just a lost art in our day and age.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
In particular,
Hmm.
because we are being formed into an angry, vitriolic,
Hmm.
yell and scream at all times sort of culture,
Hmm. Yeah,
because that's what gets amplified online. You
it
want more
does.
clicks, you want more retweets and shares and likes, yell and
Mm,
scream, and you'll have them, and
mm.
that's a problem. So, but I do think there's a way forward. I think there's an
Yeah.
antidote to that, and it is to embody the sort of spirit's work in our lives as he
Yes.
forms us into the sort of people God always meant for us to be.
And that's what we're doing here. We're trying
Mhm.
to reform it for sure
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
not going away. It's definitely
Hmm.
not going away. And I am now a grandparent. Of course, they're,
Mm.
only a year and 7 months. But the minute you pull the phone out, I mean, they are just gravitationally pulled.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine what parents. I did not raise children in the era where they had a phone in their right hand and an iPad in their left and a laptop and a desktop and all the things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel their pain greatly, but that's why we're here so that
Yeah.
we can help them understand how these tools, as you say, are forming us. I just love
Mm.
how you say that.
Mm.
I'm also so curious about the 3 words in your subtitle because I'm an author. I know the power of selecting a subtitle is almost more important than the title. And
Yeah.
yours is cultivating, great verb choice. Cultivating contentment, resilience, and wisdom. I'm so curious how, out of all the words in the English language, you chose those 3 and applied them to this analog Christian idea and this digital age.
Yeah. What a wonderful question.
Mm.
Analog Christian's a really personal book for me. So I've told
Mm.
people I really wrote the book as a sort of prayer. I'm not
Aw,
writing it as somebody who has arrived and now here I am as the guru wanting to teach everybody how to live their life. I actually
it's
wrote it
evident.
for myself.
It's
I
very
just
evident, though.
recognized,
It really is.
oh, I'm glad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wrote it because I just see my own need and the my
Mm-hmm.
own sort of the undoing, of me and my soul and my life, that
Mm-hmm.
I've had to reckon with. That's the subtitle, cultivating contentment, resilience, and wisdom in the digital age, because I found, and I talk about this early on in the book, I found myself so utterly discontent, fragile, and foolish in much
Ooh.
of my life.
Mm.
Often deeply connected to, again, my digital addictions and my sort of reckless leveraging of things like social media and
Mm-hmm.
news media, and allowing those realities to again form me into the sort of person that
Yeah.
I never intended to be. And that person was a person of deep discontentment,
Yeah.
really, really fragile, and just really foolish in a lot of the decisions I was making. So
That's good.
again, the book is a prayer. It's my prayer, my longing for contentment, resilience, and wisdom
Mm.
as God, reforms me into the sort of person he longs for me to be.
It's so, so, so good. I will say, because it's so subtle. And one of the sentences that I've already read to my Heartlifters is you write, and one of the most effective ways of lulling us is to situate us in a never ending loop of comparison, which eventually breeds contempt before finally devolving into unprecedented levels of self-centric despair. Gosh, I mean, I was a writing teacher too, so the formation of a powerful sentence is like so cool. I can't even imagine. That's like just one of 5 or 6 you write one after the other. That lulling, it is like, that's a lullaby, right? It's just like more,
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
less sense of self, less, it depreciates. Like
Yeah.
I'm 63. And even my 2 daughters in their 30s are like, Mom, you've never, ever talked about your weight like this. Like I was anorexic in
Mm.
college and stuff. And I was
Wow.
really set upon raising girls. I have a son as well. All 3 of them, we didn't have any of the glamour magazine. We didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
I rarely talked about my appearance or praised their, I just was very intentional because of
Mm.
my history.
Yeah.
But they both, and they're right. And, when I was reading through this, I thought, I think Hugh just put a finger on it's so subtle,
Mm. Yeah.
To every day be seeing images and images and images. It does bring us to an unprecedented level of self-centric despair. Can you explain that to us, what self-centric despair means, just so
Yeah.
that we can all really have that in our vocabulary and add that to our intelligence?
Yeah. Yeah. Self-centric despair is, I distinguish it a little bit from just self-centeredness. It
You
can
do.
be a form of self-centeredness or narcissism. It can be that, but I think it's much more than that. So,
Mm-hmm.
the self-centered person, or to a further extreme, the narcissistic person, is the sort of person that can do nothing but um hog the limelight. They want all sort of attention on them. They
Mm-hmm.
want to present a particular view of themselves. I don't know how familiar you are with the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram
Oh,
3.
so,
So
so aware and trained. Yes.
yeah, so for me, that is that's a shadow side for me, that
Mm-hmm.
I am constantly living with this heightened awareness of, what do people think about me? Am
Yeah.
I worth, at its worst, it's like, am I worth anything? Am I worth
Mm-hmm.
love?
Yeah. If
All
you're
those
not
sorts of
doing
things.
it, if you're not achieving and
Yeah,
have ambition and
exactly.
striving, I get you. You're
Yeah.
my wing.
Yeah. So that would be more in line with just sort of classic self-centeredness, or even
Mm-hmm.
narcissism, or something like that. Self-centric despair, though, I think is much more universal. What I mean by that is, to put it simply, self-centric despair is the inability to see life through any lens other than the lens of self. So it's not that you're necessarily trying to have all eyes on you. Sometimes it is, but for
Mm-hmm.
many, it's not that. It's rather the inability to experience and to see life through the lens of another person. It's the lack of actual deep, meaningful empathy.
Yeah.
It's the lack of sort of a big, broad breadth of understanding that all of life is a gift, and it's happening all around us, and we have a part to play in the story of life. And instead, to see all of life mitigated through just me. How am I
Yeah.
experiencing things? And
Right.
it's despair because life is much bigger than me. It's much bigger than
Mhm.
you. Life is
Thank
a
God.
gift bestowed upon, the planet by God, who
Hmm.
loves us and is for us and is with us. And life is by its nature communal. There's been a lot of
Hmm.
research done. Uh, uh, Recently, the US Surgeon General actually a
Oh,
year or two ago came out with some data, and basically based on scientific studies, he said loneliness is worse for the physical health of a human than smoking 12 cigarettes a day. It is better to smoke a pack of cigarettes with friends than to go jogging alone. Essentially,
yeah.
like, it's just so wild. Yeah, and I think that really matters because in the
Hmm.
digital age, I mean, you just think about even the physicality of how
Hmm.
we engage
Hmm.
things like news media, social media, and whatever else. You pull out, I mean, you see this all the time at coffee shops or in line at the grocery
Or
store
I say
or
in
even
waiting
at,
rooms,
yeah, in waiting
waiting
rooms or at
rooms.
restaurants. People are immersed in these small little black boxes they
They
carry
are
around in their back
immediately.
pockets.
Hmm.
And what it does is it immerses you in a world and you think that you are connecting. But in
Hmm.
the real world, what's actually happening is you're sitting in the midst of real humans in a real place at a real
Hmm.
time, holding a small black box, just staring at it.
I know. It's
You
so
know,
horrifying, actually. If you really like, you are making us aware of the severity of it, the
yeah.
ramifications. Yeah, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's self-centric despair. We are all living in the
Yes.
world of self,
Hmm.
totally isolated, alone, so quickly forgetting that, again, life is a gift and it's a communal gift meant to be experienced and lived in a real place with real people.
Yeah, and even I see every day. I'm a walker now that I have a brand new right hip.
Yeah.
I am back to walking a lot, and I see this, and I
Mhm.
think I hope you don't trip or and it's
Yeah.
definitely I have my podcast on for sure, or some I have some, not mine, but others. I listen to others.
Yep.
But there are times where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I remember how to walk without listening to
Yeah.
something. And that what that does that, and it takes me away from nature, which is so healing. That's a healing balm to us. It takes us away from the true healing.
Yeah.
And I was, like you said, I was just in a waiting room yesterday, and the minute I sat down, I went and pulled out my Kindle, which is on my phone, and didn't even look at the other people in the room. Whereas
Yeah.
before, this all in life, you would engage and have conversation and, share things. You actually call it a pandemic of self-centric despair. I'm going to read this from chapter 1 of your book. Our willing participation in this ruse, I love you call it that, has led us down a path toward crisis. History will remember 2020 as the year of the pandemic, but long before COVID-19 shut things down, there was a different sort of pandemic on the rise. It's what I call the pandemic of self-centric despair. By self-centric, I do not mean self-centered, like you said, narcissistic or arrogant, although those things can be a part of that. But self-centric persons are not always and necessarily full of themselves. While healthy introspection and self-awareness invite us to look inward in order to live outward for the sake of others, self-centrism is an unremitting gaze inward, an inability to see life as anything more than the comparative background to the foreground of our own thoughts, feelings, and perception of experiences. We are all self-centric to varying degrees, but the digital age has accelerated our journey down this dead end path. Holy cow. I mean, holy cow. I feel like, the horse that wears the blinders, right? It's just, you're looking at this little box or iPad or whatever. It now is a reflective mirror,
Yeah.
right? And a
Yep.
measuring of, I'm not good enough. I'm not like that person. I can't do this.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, you think about social media, that is really all it is.
yeah, it
It's an
is.
invitation to see the glossy highlights of others.
Yeah.
And I think the mechanism is designed that way because that's what keeps it scrolling. I mean, that
Hmm.
is the
No,
addictive
it's the
nature of it.
algorithm for sure.
Yeah, it's the algo is designed where you're just sort of comparing the reality of your lived life with the glossy, curated, filtered backdrop highlights of others.
Hmm.
And I mean, that could lead to, it could only lead to despair. What else would there be,
Yeah,
And
I know.
um, so, yeah, I think recognition of it, awareness of it matters so much because it's the first step on the journey toward intentionally breaking ourselves free from that sort
Yes.
of endless loop.
Yeah. And that, I know that I have very wise community. And I know that none of this is probably new, but for me, it was new because of the way that you're bringing it to us and inviting us to see how it is deforming us. I just hadn't heard it said that way, that
Mm,
deforming, right? And you also write about how it is shifting our focus. You write, and we're downward and then we're inward, right?
yeah.
Instead of outward towards others. So
Yep.
anytime you only look, I mean, this is what I do for a living, helping people move and look into their past long enough, just long enough to make meaning of it, make sense of it, and make peace with it
Yeah.
so that we can move into the future freedom that Christ has given to us. So if we're
Yes.
only looking downward and inward, that point, I was just like, wow. Well, look at that posture. Well, you can't look because you have to look on YouTube. But, it's such an escapism in a sense of
Yeah.
reality, and so many of us already want to escape from reality if reality is hard. But what that's doing is keeping us from looking outward and upward.
Yep. Mm.
You talk about this 19-year-old named Madison that just broke my heart. We've heard several stories in the news like this. But if you wouldn't mind sharing it with us and what you maybe gleaned from that, that would help us.
Yeah, it was several years ago, a young woman named Madison Holleran who, if you looked on her Instagram
Mhm.
feed, you would think, oh my goodness, all American girl has everything
Yeah,
that any girl
gorgeous.
would ever
Yep.
want.
Mhm.
Yeah, beautiful young woman, lots of friends, wonderful family, was going to a pretty prestigious university on the East Coast on an athletic scholarship. She ran track, she was
All
in
the things.
shape. All the girls loved her, all the boys loved her. It was just she had it all together. And then one night,
Mm,
she stands on, one of the top floors of this parking garage in Philadelphia and jumps off and ends her own life. ESPN and several others do an entire write up of her life. And there's a book written about her story. And what they
mm.
came to realize was that the sort of glossy, curated, filtered version of her life that she presented to the world, one, was not reflective of how she really felt and how she was really
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
So, but two, and maybe just as dangerously, she had to keep up appearances online. So
Yes.
she continued to create a chasm between her reality and what others thought was her reality, which
Mhm.
actually just boxed her into this cage of isolation. She felt like no one knew her because
Yeah.
she had to keep up appearances online. And what's
Right.
really sad is she had so many people in her life who, had
Mhm.
they known, would
Yes.
have, they weren't impressed with her Instagram. They just loved
No.
her.
That gives me
And
chills.
and
Mhm.
yet, we live in a world where a young 19-year-old woman like that feels such innate pressure
Mhm.
to, again, keep up online appearances and to
Mhm.
present a particular version of herself where everybody thinks she's got so many friends, such a wonderful life, she's so well connected. And yet she
Desperate.
got to the point of such loneliness,
And
such dark
desperation.
loneliness,
Mhm.
that she felt like the way out was to end her own life. And it doesn't need to be that way, And I
No,
think what we
no.
need to do is to bring all of that stuff to light and stop curating and filtering and presenting a particular image of ourselves and actually offer our whole selves to one another, like our
Mm.
real, gritty, messy,
Mhm.
complex, complicated selves to one anher. Um,
Yeah, that's how we
so
used to
that
do it.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, self centric despair leads to really dark places.
It does, and I have been there and there, and I'm trying to figure out, so that's why I'm so happy you're here because I know that you have hope for us. I've read the book. I
Yeah.
know that you have an alternative, and that alternative is love,
Yeah.
right? And what
Yeah.
is that? What did you find when you were, as you said, this was your book. This is a book that you wrote from your own journey,
Yeah.
which is typical for many of us as
Yeah.
authors. We write
Yeah.
what we need. What did you find that was perhaps the antidote or the way
Yeah.
out or the way forward? Wow, Heartlifters. That was a lot of eye-opening information and an illuminating conversation with Jay Kim, author of Analog Christian. Wanted to repeat one of the most important things I think Jay brought to us, and he wrote in speaking about this digital addiction, this digital deformation, actually, that is deforming us. And I can only say in my own life, calling me away from deep work, from a capacity to be able to focus for any period of time. I can see this on a daily basis, how it has created this in me. He writes, and one of the most effective ways of lulling us into a never-ending loop of comparison, which eventually breeds contempt, before finally devolving into unprecedented levels of self-centric despair. And he writes that self-centric despair, and he spoke to us about this, is the inability to see life in any way other than the lens of self. You know, life is so much bigger than we are, but it seems that I'll just speak for myself. I cannot speak for you, but I know in my own life, as I have examined my heart over this past summer in light of all the things that I do on social media, I have seen that there is a decrease in my capacity for joy and happiness. I just have thought back to the days in my life when I was raising children without internet and without all of these distractions. Oh, sure, we had distractions. I'm not that old, but I do see a diminishing capacity and a decrease in my capacity to focus. And I am just so grateful that we have Jay Kim here to help us understand our digital dependence and what we can do about it. Please join me on Friday for part 2 of my conversation, where Jay and I do get into the anecdote, which is love, connection, community, service to others. And I'm just so excited to bring that to you. In the meantime, please make sure at the beginning here of season 13 that you are subscribed to my newsletter so that you know when the newest podcast episodes are released and you get all the additional goodies and resources that go with that. I just don't want you, honestly, to miss anything, because this season is going to be so powerful and broad and deep and wide and all the things. And I just want to bring it to you so that you can become the very best, healthiest you. So hop over to JanelleRaridan.com, or you can go HeartliftCentral.com if that's easier for you to remember. They both go to the same place. And for sure, meet me over on Instagram at Janelle Rardon, JanelleRardon, just in case you don't know how to spell it, because it's a little tricky. Meet me over on Instagram, especially on Wednesday when this releases, and then on Friday when we release part 2 as a bonus. I want to connect with you. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking about my conversation with Jay. This is a community. Yeah, it's online. I get it. But I really want to hear from you. And I want to know your thoughts because they're very important to me. I don't want to be in this alone. I want to share this information and share the conversation with you. So until next time.
Thanks for listening today. It was great having you here. For even more great content and resources, please join the Stronger Everyday online community at JanelleRardon.com. Always remember, you, my friend, have value, worth, and dignity.